Hello everyone. I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today we are going to talk about reading for fun versus reading for research. This is specifically in terms of reading for research for your writing. So this isn't for like doing a school project or doing some sort of official research or anything like that. This is specifically you're a writer or you're an author, and whether you're writing historical fiction or some sort of other writing where you need to do some sort of research for some particular aspect of your story. First things first, reading for fun. Pretty straightforward. You're literally just sitting and reading a book just to enjoy it, just to unwind, relax, and read a good story. Oftentimes when you're reading a book for fun, you're going to read a lot faster, or sometimes you might actually read a bit slower because you're savoring it, you're enjoying it. No judgment on reading speed, but chances are that you're not as hung up on looking for any sort of details or really lingering a whole lot on anything that you're reading. Chances are you're just kind of reading, going along like fun time, da-da-da. You're not really thinking too hard about what you're reading. Even if it is a complicated subject that you're reading, or you're reading a particularly challenging book, at the end of the day, you're reading it just to read it. And also chances are you're probably just going to read it from cover to cover, and you're not going to do a whole lot of flipping back to this chapter and flipping back to that chapter and all that jazz. The actual amount of mental energy that goes into reading for fun, definitely nowhere near compared to reading for research. The biggest difference that I can show y'all with what reading for research looks like. This is just one of my books that I have been utilizing for one of my historical fiction novels that I've been working on, which is specifically about Marie Antoinette and her life briefly before, when she was living in Austria, and cataloging her life while she was living in Versailles, and eventually the end of her life in Paris. And as you can see, I got all kinds of fun sticky notes going on here with this tome, and as I said, this is one of a stack of books that I'm reading specifically for research purposes. And while yes, I have had a lot of fun reading these books, and I continue to have a lot of fun reading these books, I read with the intent of researching for the novel that I'm writing. And it is still currently a work in progress, definitely something that is not going to be finished within the next 5 years. If you're waiting on that, I'm really sorry. It's going to be a while. A lot going into that book. To give y'all an idea and the green screen is kind of greening this out too, because I have a lot of sticky notes that are lime green in this. But I even have notes written on the sticky notes, and some of them are detailing like specific passages and things like that. And a big part of that is, especially if you're writing historical fiction like I do, you need to be sure of the facts, because if you're writing a book that contains factual information, the last thing you want to do is have incorrect information, because people will immediately call you on that, and it sucks and it's embarrassing. So doing your due diligence first and foremost to make sure that your story is getting its facts straight is a big part of reading for research. But then even beyond the history report-esque research that can go into reading for writing your book is even if it's you just wanting to get a feel for what a certain time period would feel like. Let's say, for instance, you're writing a magical realism book, and let's say that you really love the whole idea of the whole detective noir era, that you just love everything about that, but you don't want it to necessarily be that historical time period. You just want the essence of it. So yeah, maybe you're reading to research, well, what does that feel like? What would that dialogue sound like? What are some of the catchphrases and lingo that people said during that time period? What kind of clothes did they wear? What kind of technology did they have available to them during that time period? And then taking that factual information and then utilizing it for your own purposes in your completely fictional fantasy novel. And that is still research. Even though you're not necessarily trying to be factual about it, you want to be true to what that time period or that particular flavor, genre, culture, etc., the essence of it. That's the essence of it. That still requires research. And even if your book isn't full of sticky notes like mine usually are, it usually does involve probably putting some sort of notes in your manuscript while you're writing it, or putting notes in a separate notebook. You have whatever method that you have. You're going to be going through this book looking for specific information in order to fulfill this need that you have. The difference in that, as I said previously, is there's going to be a lot of flipping back and forth. You're probably going to be reading along and then realize that you remember reading something like 4 chapters ago that you're like, oh wait, this detail is actually really important. Let me go find that and write that down. And I do know a lot of writers that can get really caught up in this process and just absolutely go down the special interest rabbit hole, and suddenly you have way more research than you know what to do with. That just does not fit in your story. An example of which, when I was writing Geisha Hands, I at one point spent an entire month researching Japanese furniture. I'm not even kidding. It started off with just making sure that I understood the proper terminology for different kinds of Japanese furniture, because they have very different kinds of furniture over there than here in Western culture. And then that turned into me learning about the history of how different types of furniture are made, about the lacquering process, about the different eras of style and all that. And then all of a sudden I was thinking about purchasing a $200 textbook on Japanese furniture. And that's when I had to take a step back and realize, do we really need a $200 textbook about Japanese furniture for this story? Does this help us? And I know that answer probably seems obvious, but when you're in the thick of it, these are the questions you have to ask yourself. So that is a big part of reading for research, is keeping the scope of your work in mind, reining yourself in when you realize you're really going down those rabbit holes. And I mean, if you have the time and space and it brings you joy, absolutely go running down those rabbit holes and have a blast. I mean, I did that with several things while researching Geisha Hands. However, make sure that you're still making progress on what you're supposed to actually be doing. So if you find yourself all of a sudden 2 hours deep into a YouTube warren of videos about super specific things that at the end of the day really are not going to make it into your manuscript, rein it in. So make sure that you're always asking yourself, is this relevant? Do I really need to research this? Do I really need to research this at this degree that I'm researching it? Keep that stuff in mind so that you can keep yourself moving forward, because the research process can be very dangerous in that aspect. The next thing that's really important is, as I mentioned previously, have some sort of way to catalog what you're researching, whether it's like me, putting a bunch of sticky notes in a book that you can then reference, and then I actually have a full working outline of the story where I'm putting this factual information in there, especially if it's date driven. So let's say you're writing a World War II historical fiction novel. You need to know the order of events that happened in World War II in order to properly tell the story. So having an outline so that you're like, okay, this happened on this day, and then this happened a month later, and then this happened a week later, and blah, 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 going down the line, making sure that you can set yourself up for success, outlining out and having those places to plug in that information that you researched. And a big part of that is having the information that you researched. Just sitting down and being like, I'm just going to read this book and I'm not going to write down anything, I'm not going to mark anything, chances are you're not going to remember the bulk of what you needed to remember. So do yourself that favor. Have a place where you can actually catalog all that information. Use sticky notes. Use an extra notebook to take notes. Take notes simultaneously on your computer or your phone or whatever while you're reading. Maybe take the time that if you're that type of person that works better, talk into your phone with a recording device, or maybe you have a separate little tape recorder thing, whatever you need to do. Make sure that you are actually recording the information that you need for working on your book. And even in a non-factual, non-historical sort of book, again, whether you're writing sci-fi or magical realism or even just general straight up fiction, again, taking notes will really help you. Like I said, again, with the example of the noir detective feel, writing down what were the slang terms that they use, writing them down to make sure that you get them right, that you don't confuse them, so that you're not saying something like it's not brain science or it's not rocket surgery, things, little flow ups like that, which that sounds really obvious and silly to us now, but I'm sure that it can get a little bit confusing and you can get a little mixed up with some of the terminology from eras past if you're trying to include that kind of stuff in your story. Be sure to take notes on that. And even in a non-factual context, sometimes writing down those notes will also help you get that jump start, get your writing started, so that once you sit down with all of your notes, you already probably have those ideas percolating in your head and you're like, oh yeah, I'm so excited about this detail. I can't wait. I'm going to make this whole scene about it and they're going to say these catchphrases and it's going to be so witty and fun that even if you're writing factual information down, it can really help to jumpstart the actual process of sitting down at your computer or sitting down with your notebook and actually writing the thing. Last but not least, you're probably going to read the same book more than once, and you're probably going to read more than one book on the same subject as well. With Geisha Hands, I have a full glossary available, full bibliography sort of thing, where I actually cataloged all of the different resources that I used to research for Geisha Hands, and it is a huge list, y'all. It's like 3 pages long of all the books, all the websites, just all of the different resources that I used in order to research for that book. And the Marie Antoinette book, it's going to be the same thing. I have a huge stack of books that I've been reading and sticky noting, and there are a lot of online sources, and then of course just information that I know from studies past in school and things like that, just all of that information. It's a lot to catalog, and you're going to end up going back to it, looking back and being like, oh wait, what about this information? You're going to keep going back to the material. You're going to seek out multiple sources of material. So that's a big thing to remember, that even if you are reading a full book series for fun and it's multiple books, it's very different than sitting down with a big pile of research books that you're probably going to be flipping back and forth, leafing through, writing halfway through, realizing, oh my God, wait, what about this detail? Let me find that chapter again. It's very much a process that is technically never complete. It's definitely chefs, put your knives down, you be done. It's good enough. Because you can go down that research rabbit hole forever. And while you can reread books, there are books that I enjoy immensely that I've reread dozens of times, but you don't reread them because you have to, is the difference. Is that I'm pretty sure in the same sitting, you don't close that book that you enjoyed and be like, oh, really enjoyed reading that book. I finished it. Oh, wait, by the way, let me go re-look at chapter 22, that one thing. I highly doubt that you're going to do something like that, but that is something that does come up a lot when you're reading for research, is you're going to be flipping back. You're going to put the book down. You're going to be knee deep in another book and suddenly have to come back to a different book that you were reading previously, all full of sticky notes, and be like, wait a minute, what? This? It's a lot of back and forth, and it's important to be able to keep track of all of that information so that you can streamline the process as much as possible. And of course, the last thing is, a lot of people shy away from doing historical fiction or even adding those types of elements to their stories because research is a lot of work. And honestly, especially these days, anything that we can do to involve less work is typically better. But it doesn't have to be work, is the biggest thing. Is when your book starts feeling more like your 5th grade research project that you slogged through and you absolutely hated it every step of the way, probably time to take a break from working on that and maybe go do something fun for a little bit to give your poor fried brain a rest. Is, well, yes, reading a book for research can be very intense and obviously can also be exhausting, and working on a story that requires research can be a lot lot of work and be exhausting, but it should still be fun to some degree. You should still be getting enjoyment out of the process, because honestly, y'all, with writing, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. And it doesn't have to be yay, it's a party level of fun 100% of the way, because trust me, it's not going to be a fun party 100% of the way working on any book of any kind. But when it really starts feeling more like a slog, it's time to take a step back from the research and go do something else, or even just straight up working on the actual writing itself. Work on a part of it that doesn't require you to do any new research for that portion of it. Maybe work on a part that's solely character based. It's furthering the character, not so much the historical plot. That can also be a big help with lifting that load too. Or even just do something completely different. Go read for fun, go work on a different project, or do something completely not writing related at all. Whatever you need to do to make sure that you don't let yourself get super burnt out and eventually hate your book. So I hope this has been helpful, y'all. If y'all like this video, please be sure to give it a like, and if you're new, subscribe. Thank y'all so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.